Let's move straight to our next conversation. The recapitalization embarked upon by the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, is a regulatory mandate requiring banks to increase their minimum capital to strengthen their financial foundation, improve resilience against economic shocks, and support larger economic growth. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, has recognized the strategic importance of the just concluded bank recapitalization, stating that the program is already yielding positive results. The IMF also noted that the initiative implemented by the CBN Governor, Olayemi Cardoso, is a timely and appropriate policy decision in the face of persistent volatility in global oil supply. All right, BKO, the endorsement by the IMF, how significant is it? And also, if you also look at it...
We need significant boulders against the volatility that we are certain to experience in the financial sector. And that is why the IMF is particularly impressed that the recapitalization of Nigerian banks, which the CBN came up with, has gone down very well, because to them it was the right time to do this because of the severe hardship that normally will come after some global shocks. Countries have been going through pains as a result of the war in the Middle East, and the CBN's decision to get Nigerian banks recapitalized really helped to absorb these shocks in a period of significant stress. So, and confidence in the Nigerian banking sector and the financial system generally has been reinforced by the successful recapitalization.
BK, are you still with us? Okay, while we try to reconnect with BKO. Now, with this endorsement by the IMF, and the CBN is now saying that Nigerian banks are now, the banking sector now resilient. Talk to me, what are your expectations going forward?
Well, the part of the matter is that banks, are like the lifeblood of any economy. The health of banks will determine the growth and prosperity of any country. They are supposed to mobilize funds for savings. They are supposed to fund credit. They are supposed to fund infrastructure. So I think if the banks are resilient enough, it's going to determine how strong the economy of the country is. I believe what the CBN did is in order. And this is the third time Nigeria will be carrying out this kind of recapitalization. The first time was in 2004, 2005. Okay. But the difference is that in 2004, the banks were reduced from 89 to 25. But in this case, we had from 38 to 33. However, in the first recapitalization, I think there was a lot of job loss. People, I think about 8,600 workers lost their jobs. The second time in 2010, we had also a lot of people lost their jobs. In fact, if you compare the first two recapitalization, I think about 12,000 jobs were lost. Okay. But in this case, there is no significant loss of jobs. So I think it's quite commendable. And I think that we are going to see a kind of shift, from what the CBN used to be. Okay. And the IMF also predicted that the Nigerian economy will grow by 4.1% percent in 2006. And I think by 4.3 in 2027. So I think gradually Nigeria is moving forward. There's been a kind of an increase in external reserve, going to almost about $51 billion. So this is quite commendable compared with what we used to have in the past years. Okay. The former CBN governor was the only CBN governor since 1999 that spent 2 terms.
Okay.
Probably not because he was good, but because he was a good boy of the establishment. He was good to the boys in politics. So, and a lot of things happened. Having a CBN that had to refund all sort of millions of dollars straight to him and all that. So I think it was the economy was in a total mess when the current CBN governor came. I think we are having a kind of professionalism being introduced to the banking sector. However, the government still need to do perform a lot of oversight functions. Banks should be encouraged to fund agriculture, which most of the banks categorize as a risk sector.
Okay.
They need to fund infrastructure. They need to fund energy, and also they need to improve on their internal infrastructure so that all this kind of over-debiting and all sort of things that people suffer, will not.
All right, I've just been told that BKO is back. BKO, I need you to land on your thoughts so that I can give you my next question.
Yes, I'm saying that the IMF was particularly impressed with the successful recapitalization of Nigerian banks, and IMF already sees Nigeria's growth rebounding to 4.3% in 2027, despite the earlier downgrade to 4.1% in 2026. But they are recommending tighter monetary policy.
Okay.
So that there continue to be incremental growth. As I said earlier, the reforms have been painful, but definitely the reforms have come with some gains, especially in terms of fiscal resources, because those reforms have freed significant fiscal resources. Between March 2024 and August 2025, more than 2.45 trillion was made available to states. With these funds, they can support infrastructure, security, and even social intervention. So data from FAC shows clearly that there has been significant rise in monthly allocation. What people want to see is for government to match the sincere boldness of its reforms with speed of execution, especially in terms of infrastructure. If we are building roads, we have to speed up the construction of those roads so that people can feel relief. Relief has to come. It has to reach the most vulnerable of our people. The kind of relief that will ease hardship on them and reinforce their confidence in the government. We need visible and measurable progress, especially on roads infrastructure. As I've said many times, the hardship that we face today is the price that we have to pay for those reforms. But Nigerians want to see visible impacts of these reforms on human lives.
Okay. All right, BKO, with over 70% of the capital coming from local investors, talk about this recapitalization. Does this reflect a renewed confidence in the domestic, does it renew domestic confidence for you?
It certainly reinforces confidence because banks that are in good health, or let me say good health, are in position to provide greater lending to the real sector. This is what we want. They can also provide lending even for the small and medium scale enterprises that are really the biggest catalyst for growth in any economy. So we want to see our banks in good financial health, and that is what, in my view, will enable them to do big businesses. And the CBN has already said, look, if you cannot meet our capital stipulation, you can downgrade to a regional bank. They are not saying, shut down so that people will lose their jobs in significant numbers, but you can downgrade to a regional bank. You will still be useful in the financial sector. So, given the way that Nigerian banks successfully went through this recapitalization, I can say that confidence is renewed. I have never lost confidence in Nigerian banks. You go to some African countries, you see Nigerian banks there, that is Ghana or even Kenya that I went to the other day, I saw Nigerian banks. So Nigerian banks are already big players on the continent, but I want to see them just as big as some of the banks in South Africa in terms of balance sheet and other indices.
You heard what BKO said, talking about the confidence in Nigerian banks. You see what's going on, the Iran, US. Are Nigerian banks now strong enough to withstand global shocks?
I believe they are now stronger.
Stronger?
Yes.
Talk to me. Why do you
withstand the wild wind? You know, given the unpredictable nature of global political economy.
Okay.
Nobody ever thought that we were going to have the Iran war, maybe about 2 years ago, Iran-US war. And what is happening in Ukraine, which is going to about 3 years now, it means that the world is unstable. And it's only when you have financial institutions that are strong, that enjoy global and local confidence, that you can be talking about building your economy. And I also think that BKO said that he never lost trust in Nigerian banks. I think that trust was tested ahead of the 2023 election.
Oh, the Naira
the confidence of so many Nigerians, because you put, people are compelled to go and put their money in banks, and you cannot get the money back, and so many businesses collapsed. So I'm happy that we're able to bounce back, to reinforce, to rebuild the confidence that the banking sector lost, especially during that time, in that period. When we had somebody there was, partisan, the CBN governor that was partisan. So I think the recapitalization process is also a kind of rebuilding the confidence, of Nigerians that, look, you can put your money in banks and then you feel safe. And I think that is one of the greatest indicators that we are serious to, rebuild the economy. So I hope the banks will also begin to invest in, give funds to, small-scale businesses. People want to invest in long-term projects, energy infrastructure, industrialization, so that we can bring back our lost industries. At a time you are talking about Leyland at Ibadan, talking about Teta Lai, in Kwara State, Bashita, the flour mills in Lagos, the textile factory in Kaduna, the paper mill in Jeba. So if the banks are strong enough, they can finance these projects, and they will be able to create more jobs, and Nigeria will be able to bounce back, from the current situation that we find ourselves.
Now, looking at this, will this trend translate to easy access to loans, maybe lower credits, and also more jobs, and also real economic growth?
The CBN said, we're able to raise trillions of naira, but the oversight function of the CBN, must never be found wanting. The CBN needs to, do more of regulation, so that banks will be encouraged to fund agriculture, and not just to fund businesses that are short-term, that will give immediate benefit, long-term projects that can create more jobs for Nigerians. So I think the CBN needs to do more to ensure that not just that the banks are strong enough, but at least not to lose sight of the oversight functions.
Not to lose sight of the oversight functions. And also looking at cryptocurrency firms as well. All right, we need to go on the